in the last century, over 1 million Italians left southern Italy for the Americas. They went to South America, they went to North America, and of course, those areas were booming. Those areas in the world were going through prosperity cycles. And so it made a lot of sense for people to leave areas where there was no opportunity and to go where there was opportunity.
I couldn't help myself. I have to get you on video doing your exercises. See them. I didn't know they were army men. Gotta stay in shape. Come on, do it one more time.
And our subject is living the retire early lifestyle, the balanced life in the here and now, not the delayed gratification plan and all of the imbalances that causes, especially for prolonged periods of time. And so there's so much information nowadays about leaving USA, going abroad, and it appears that it has intensified in the last couple of years. And it appears to be on a roll. And as we look at events the way they are happening in the news, we see that there are things that are developing that weren't so prevalent in times past. Like, when did you, before, the RAM magazine, Retire Abroad Media magazines were intentionally creating bubbles, and they are intentional in specific parts of the globe in order to take advantage of them. When was that happening? It's a most recent phenomenon, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years. And it's intensifying because you have more and more people that the longer they're on social media, the more of a following they get. And therefore, there's more people following the same thought pattern. Even though it was always on our minds that we could move to Portugal. But we didn't, because it seemed counterintuitive, being that was the old world. You got to understand the old world, what that means, in the sense that in the last century, over 1 million Italians left southern Italy for the Americas. They went to South America, they went to North America, and of course, those areas were booming. Those areas in the world were going through prosperity cycles, and that was the trend of the time. Now, back then when it was happening is because it really was happening. The prosperity trends were in the Americas. They didn't last. I mean, in the 20s, Argentina was booming, and in the 20s, North America was booming in so many ways. But of course, the crash of '29 came around, and those things kind of didn't last forever, and they did the boom and bust thing. We have this school of thought going on now that the great thing to do is to find prosperity by leaving these areas now. A lot of North Americans looking at going abroad, but yet going to the old world, that seemed counterintuitive. Like so many people left the old world, and there were good reasons to leave the old world. The old world is exactly that. It's old. It's old, and old in and of itself doesn't mean bad. But in many ways, it can and does mean bad, because the new is seen as an improvement on the old. And as long as the new is an improvement, then the old is antiquated and old. Like, case in point with Portugal, when they came out with their tax exemption, a lot of people, if your only goal is to flit around the globe and not pay taxes, I'm not judging that. I'm just saying I'm going to go a little bit deeper in this conversation and beyond the simple thought process of lowering your taxes. And that is that it was the old world, and the way they're doing it there in Portugal, which they have since rescinded it because of all the problems that it created. And it was because it was simply an exemption for foreigners. The exemption on the taxes did not apply universally to everyone, meaning the locals and the foreigners. So the point being that when you discuss the idea that a forest is a pine forest, you would, of course, have to have pine trees in order to make up that pine forest, right? So if you had half oaks and half pine, you couldn't really call it a pine forest. And so it is with places like Portugal that give exemption to foreigners, and for a limited time at that. What they're doing is you're not making a wealthy nation. People say, well, I thought that would help a place like Portugal to, entice the wealthy to move in and spend money at businesses. And yes, in a certain way, that is correct. It does do that, and it does. But the wealth is not evenly distributed. That's the thought here. I've been tippy-toeing around this subject for years and saying that it doesn't trickle down to everybody. And so it doesn't really make the nation wealthy. It makes a certain industry wealthy, maybe the real estate industry or the tourism industry, but it's not in a universal wealth creation way of doing things. In history, you had, for example, how many people know that Bulgaria used to be, now they call them tax havens nowadays, but back in the day, it wasn't a tax haven, it was a free country. For example, ancient Israel, ancient biblical Israel, not modern day, I have to make the distinction, was what a free country looked like. It may have been regarded as a tax haven from other nations, but it was to be that strong nation, wealthy nation, a free nation, and if it means that in comparison to other nations it was a quote-unquote tax haven, then that's what it was. But the purpose of it wasn't to be a tax haven to other nations, you see. There was a singular purpose. By the way, I've been studying the Bible for over 30 years, and I don't mean studying it just on Wednesday and Sundays. I mean, I've been a Bible student all my life for over 30 years. So you're going to hear some things from me that aren't, if you're coming from churchianity, you're going to hear things that you don't hear in churchianity because we're not churchianity. So back to Bulgaria. Bulgaria, I had to explain all that because I didn't want to focus on the fact that, for lack of better description, I used the term tax haven, but Bulgaria had zero taxes, and the whole nation at that time when that was the case was wealthy. The citizens of Bulgaria were wealthy. Now, things happen throughout history, which it's not the subject matter of this video, which is also the same thing that happened to biblical Israel, and how nations fall, which some people say is what's happening in North America. But it's been happening to North America for a very long time, especially been happening to the old world. It was already happening many, many centuries ago, and these things do go in cycles. There is a cycle about it, and yet the cycle of going back to the old world seemed counterintuitive because they still have that ingrained. My point here is that if a nation comes to their senses and understands that the way to be a wealthy nation is to be a free nation, and therefore create wealthy citizens so that you can have a pine forest made up of pine trees, therefore a wealthy nation made up of wealthy citizens all the way across, universally speaking, across the nation, then that would be a great thing. That would be a reason to either stay put in such a country or move to such a country. But that is absolutely not the case of what happens and what is happening this day and age in a lot of these places, where they are simply just giving tax exemptions to foreigners. And as you know, you look at what happens with the gentrification, and all it does is create conflict. And we went abroad for the adventure. We're also into peaceful living. Peaceful living is by default simple living. And simple doesn't mean not doing anything. It means an uncomplicated life. Okay? And so within an uncomplicated life, there's a certain amount of frugality and minimalism, all of those things. We've never called ourselves exclusively any one of those things. Like, this isn't like a minimalist channel or a frugal channel, although we talk about all of those things because we embrace all of those principles. The peaceful part of it is the ultimate goal, is to have a peaceful living so that we can live the life that God meant us to be. And there's nothing wrong with being prosperous and wealthy because of that, because peaceful, simple living, when people are truly free and aren't lazy, does create wealth. And wealth is a natural byproduct of a people that are free, but not only free, but a people that have the values of a solid people, such as what the people of ancient biblical Israel had, that they were in agreement. They were all a people that had agreed that they would obey God and they would be subject to God, one nation under God. That's what they were. And for as long as it lasted, the people were prosperous and peaceful. And so why we didn't go to Portugal? Different people go abroad for different reasons, but we weren't looking to live, like millionaires. Well, we aren't millionaires, and if and when we would be blessed being millionaires, we wouldn't want to go somewhere and be surrounded by people much poorer and then spend money, like a millionaire. That makes no sense. And so all we wanted to do was look for that peaceful living and have a middle class lifestyle that wasn't so much elevated above the lifestyle of the locals to such a degree that you just stand out and become a source of contention with your neighbors. Of course, we can't control everybody else, and so when crowds show up and they all do things like that, of course it just spoils and creates a scenario for those that just are looking to live peacefully among their neighbors and people. It just creates a lot of challenges. And so we tend to automatically look for ways to avoid these kinds of challenges and conflicts because our ultimate goal is to have a peaceful existence. It isn't that I would never go to Europe. We did go visit Europe. We did spend some time in Europe. There's nothing wrong with legally lowering your taxes, and you have every right, as the courts have said in USA, to arrange your affairs. You don't have any obligation to pay the most taxes, and you have every right to arrange your affairs in such a way to pay the least amount that you legally owe. Nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. I'm just going a little bit deeper in this video, and I hope you got something out of that, and I hope that helps you see that, because I've talked about having diligence and being able to see things before they happen, and that's part of that conversation, is to be able to go deeper into an introspective, a biblical perspective, to look at things and say to yourself, you know what, on the surface, this sounds like a great idea, and you know what, we would save taxes for 10 years or whatever, but in light of everything we've just discussed, it's just, you just know intuitively or just biblically that it isn't going to be the end-all be-all solution, your end-all be-all forever solution. All right, again, I hope you got something out of that. Let us know what you think about this kind of introspective look at things. Thanks for coming to the video, and have a wonderful day.